Hello, everyone, and welcome to When AI Writes the Script, Who's Controlling the Brand Voice? I'm Mike Parker, CEO of P2L, and my co-host is Christine Thompson, the founder of Zetiso. Together, we are PZ. With us, getting help with your AI development and AI consulting is easy.
Easy peasy.
Yes, easy peasy. Today, our guest speaker is the founder of Originality.AI, Jon Gillham, who in most AI circles needs no introduction. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. It was pretty boring circles if I don't need an introduction.
Yeah, we'll get to more details in a bit.
What was that, Christine?
I said we'll get to more details in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In our webinar today, we will ask Jon a number of interview style questions, and then we will let you know what PZ can offer you in your company if you're interested in AI development and education. And finally, we will open up the chat to questions. So let's get started. Imagine, if you will, let's say you are responsible for maintaining your organization's brand. In a large company, your title would be CMO, CBO, or CCO. So Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Brand Officer, Chief Communications Officer. In a smaller organization, it might be Brand Manager. Here's the scenario. You are buying marketing content to support the company's brand, and you have two pay scales. Scale number one is for completely original content. It's a higher pay scale because it requires more time to research and write an article, doing it from scratch. We're both in frame. Scale number two.
You can sit a little closer, Jon.
You guessed it, is AI generated content.
Why chairs?
There you go. There you go.
So, how do you reliably know which scale to pay at, and how do you determine that objectively?
Yeah, so thanks for the intro. So I think the core problem that originality is trying to solve for, and that the majority of users face that are using our tool is exactly that. They're working with contract writers, working with freelance writers, getting content from them, and then they're happy to pay whatever the rate might be, $100, $1,000 for a piece of content, but they're not super happy to find out that it was copied and pasted out of ChatGPT in 7 seconds and pay that rate. So it's really all about sort of driving transparency between the writer, the agency, if an agency is involved, the editor, and then ultimately the client. And so that's kind of the core problem that originality sets out to solve, is to be able to help people that are buying content from writers, agencies, pay what it's worth, and for writers to get paid their worth.
Excellent. I want to back up a little bit and just highlight some key points of view so that we can hear how on earth did you get to this point, so people can understand a bit about your background, your motivation. So,
Yes. So my background has always sort of been in the content marketing space. So creating content, publishing it online, getting traffic from Google, and then helping my businesses at the time get traffic and win online with that. We built up enough capacity in sort of our own systems for exercising that we built a content marketing agency where we were doing that for other customers. Once we had sold that agency, we had seen this sort of wave of generative AI coming. We were the heaviest users of Jasper.ai, which was a tool that predated ChatGPT. And we were transparently selling AI generated content. And we had this sort of like transparent AI content, and then we had this human content division. But then we didn't have any great tools in place to be able to verify that the human content was truly human. We had policies, we had agreements with writers, but we didn't have any sort of control in place to make sure that that was human. And so that was the sort of the need that we saw coming. And then we actually ended up launching our AI detection solution 2 days or 3 days before ChatGPT went live, which has been a bit of a ride since then, for sure.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
do you remember the date?
So we went live on the Friday of like I think it was Black Friday of November 2022, and so then it was like basically the Monday that ChatGPT went live.
So that was really good timing.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight 2020, we wish we'd pushed the pace way harder. We did not think we were building what sort of turned into a societally important business. We thought we were
Mhm.
building sort of this like boring B2B vertical SaaS solution, which I like. But this was yeah, it turned into sort of a societally important business. If we pushed the pace, we would have been in the market for longer and been sort of known as the default solution when people started looking for solutions, which was the week after ChatGPT went live and people realized that this was going to change things.
So
Mhm.
how is what you're offering seen currently, like these days? Like we've seen a lot of maturity and a lot of awareness come up out of AI generated content. So how are you fitting in the market now?
Yeah, so I think we because of where we came from and there's been a lot of use case discussion around AI detection. Does it fit within academia? Does it fit within job applications? Does it fit within um, uh, online digital marketing and getting content from writers? Where do we care and where is it a good fit? People so where we fit now is we view ourselves, and I think the market views us as the leaders within the world of digital marketing. So anybody that's publishing content on the web, we think it's irresponsible to publish that content without having run it through originality, and that's the sort of positioning that we're driving towards, and I think on the right path to achieve.
So how does it distinguish between human generated content and AI generated content?
Yeah, so the sort of simplest explanation is it's kind of like the good Terminator. And so it's its own AI that can has been trained to tell the difference between human content and AI content. And so if you imagine sort of this like giant brain sitting in a room being fed millions of records of human content, millions of records of AI content, and a bunch of sort of variations in between, and saying learn to tell the difference between the two. And then that's what it does. And then once we sort of build hundreds of models and we test each of those models, we then will evaluate on a different set of data to say how accurate is it at identifying AI content versus human content. And so that's sort of the simple explanation of how what's called a classifier works at telling the difference between human content and AI content.
Is that getting harder?
Surprisingly not. So this has been one of those like um, surprises for us. When we first launched, we're like, great, we're accurate, and we're like, oh, what happens when GPT-4 comes out? What happens when 4.0, 5, 3,
Yeah.
3? Different models from Gemini, Claude, etc., DeepSeek. It's been really interesting to see that our detection efficacy has actually been closing on models, despite the number of models exploding and the size of those models exploding. And so there's been sort of this, and it kind of, when we sort of step back and think about it, it makes some sense because like the models are being trained on the same data, which is like the web content. They're being trained on the same hardware, the same transformer technology, and then the output ends up being pretty similar from a written word standpoint. And so that's been one of the surprising things where it actually hasn't been getting harder. The AI research team might disagree, but the results have been closing the gap, not increasing.
And what about the demand for having this kind of tooling?
Yeah, it certainly, I think it'll be a once in a lifetime experience in terms of going when we launched, and mistakes were made on my end in terms of how we positioned it on launch. But there was zero search volume for AI detector when we launched.
Hmm.
That was a keyword that nobody searched for. And we launched, and a year later it was multiple millions of people searches per month for a term that just 2 years ago didn't exist at all. That demand has been growing. There's some seasonality with it around the academic school year,
Hmm.
and then summer is a bit of a slowdown with it sort of ramping up September to December, and then again sort of in the spring or winter semester. And so that's year over year growth continues,
Yeah.
and then there's some seasonality with that market.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned like the school year, which had me think. So we started off with the scenario, Mike, that you brought up. And arguably, how we're positioning this conversation is that you want to get what you pay for. And you want to make sure that you're not being taken for a ride. But you mentioned about the school year. So would you say that what you're offering could apply in any industry, like across the board, or are you specialized in handling content from a particular industry?
Yeah,
Or
we're specialized in web content. We're specialized in this works best for digital marketers. We think the use case is a better fit for digital marketers. There is a real the AI detection tools are highly accurate but not perfect, and the result of that is that they are great for use cases where high accuracy but not perfection is acceptable. In academia, when you need to apply academic disciplinary action based on a AI detection findings, you need to be perfect, and no detection tool is perfect. And so we don't love our tool being used within academia, and we sort of have a deep understanding and an unfair advantage, we think, in the world of digital marketing, web content publishing, the world we come from, and it's the features that we can build for as a result of that focus.
how difficult is it for organizations to take advantage of the tooling?
So super simple. It's I shared a recent example where the Chicago Sun-Times had a freelance writer that used AI to publish a summer reading list that got published in multiple sort of major news publications. The problem was the summer reading list referenced 10 books that didn't even exist. So it was 100% AI generated, and the books didn't even exist. And this was published in major media outlets, and then they got just roasted by other newspapers covering the embarrassing state of publishing a reading list for books that didn't even exist. Our tool would have identified both the fact that it was AI generated, which could have raised a red flag to investigate further, and then we have a fact checker that identified that those 10 books didn't even exist. And so that total sort of cost and effort to be able to sort of identify that problem would have been 10 cents of work and sort of 10 seconds of work, and 14 cents would have been the cost for them to sort of have avoided that sort of major egg on their face.
And did I hear you correctly that it's not just about detecting is this human or AI generated, but you also check facts? Is that actually part of the tool then for every time you're using it?
Yeah, so the tool, we think of the tool as a complete solution for copy editors. So anybody that gets a piece of text from a writer and then needs to run it through certain checks. And so those checks right now are AI or plagiarism, fact checking, readability, grammar, spelling,
Hmm.
content optimization, and then we have some other features coming around editorial guideline compliance. But basically, it's meant to be a complete suite of tools to help anybody that is functioning as a copy editor perform their job more efficiently.
Excellent. So how, um, like with the content that's AI generated, again, I guess if I was a writer, then could I use it to say, look, I did research and I am using some content that's AI generated, but at the end of the day, I'm proofing and massaging it. Would you consider that human generated, even though you used a lot of AI help?
So I think it's a really tricky question. Sort of where's that line? And so every company is going to be different. And so what's sort of the acceptable level of AI generated content in a book by an expert on mushroom foraging? That might be a lower threshold where there's sort of real human risk compared to a summary of sports scores or a stock market analysis where you kind of don't care less potentially that AI was involved. And so we try and provide help to companies by having multiple models. So we have a light model that is more forgiving of AI editing. And so if you've used AI to do a bit of research, you've written it yourself, you used AI to do some of the editing, and you're at about sort of 5% AI has been sort of like through that process,
Hmm.
about 5% of the content has turned into AI. We still want to call that piece of content human. And so
Okay.
that and then the turbo model is no AI allowed, that where companies are AI into our content is an existential threat to our business. we do not want to have any chance that AI content gets published on our site, or worked into our platform. That is the turbo model, where it is a 1% of the content. Even if it gets over 1% of content AI, it's going to get that model is going to call it AI.
Right. Okay. So it depends on the situation, the context.
Yeah.
And that would be business owners, content creators that would be making that decision as what would be tolerable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the sort of the challenge right now, and sort of open this sort of webinar with that, but the challenge is that the risk owner, the person that is who owns the website, is having content published on their site that they may or may not know what the risk of that content is. And so our
Mm.
tool is meant to try and sort of encourage them to create guidelines that exist between the writer and the risk owner and the business owner, and not let sort of the writers go come up with a plan. We've seen scenarios where come up with a plan that involves AI. We've seen scenarios where website owners have come to us and their entire site was de-indexed by Google, and they said, "What happened? I didn't know my writers were using AI." I said, "Well, you had sort of one intern that had spun up an API that published a thousand blog posts in a day.
Wow.
I don't think he was writing them himself.
No.
So I think AI was involved, and like it sucks, but they just had no policy and no awareness that their site was being overrun by AI slop, and they suffered the consequences. The marketing intern looked like a genius. The graph went up for a little bit until it crashed back down to the ground.
So this goes back, I think, a bit to some of the conversations, Mike, we've had earlier about needing to have the AI governance. You need to have a plan. You need to
Mhm.
have, and this is where obviously we've also talked about the fact that different laws of the land in different places will be really promoting certain behaviors, but I think all businesses really need to be proactive and in making that decision and being, like you've said, like the transparent sort of brings us into a little bit of the next bit of the conversation. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, so you're talking about ethical and legal considerations,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, when you're looking at it, it really depends geographically, I would guess. If you're under the European AI Act, or if you're in a state that's not regulated for AI at all, there would be completely different considerations, right, for what kind of content you would publish in.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think most legal frameworks are going to focus around what type of content will produce the most societal harm. Um, Not that written word isn't incredibly sort of significant to society and can move it, but sort of the sort of acute harm that can come from um, synthetic and AI generated video, audio, images are significantly higher. That can sort of the right image or the right or wrong
Mm.
video can move elections, and cause societal harm in a really sort of like acute way. And so that's where a lot of the regulatory frameworks are focusing on the type of content, the type of media that can cause the most kind of acute harm. There hasn't been a lot of laws that have been implemented that influence the way that AI generated content gets used. Some examples of it being implemented are the FTC has come out with some guidelines around synthetic reviews, that AI generated reviews are not cool. That's sort of an example of something that has gotten pushed through, where they're saying that, yeah, we don't want AI generated reviews to exist on platforms, and that shouldn't be acceptable in society.
Yeah, actually, I just want to pause here and just focus in on two terms that you've been using. Make sure everybody gets them. I have the definitions here that I can share. So, a big part of that conversation then is about AI ethics. And depending, like you're suggesting at it depends on the industry, depends on the context, depends on the laws of the land and where that's going. But I think we all agree that no matter what the law is, to take care of your business, you want to be proactive in thinking this way, because eventually I would expect in most places the law is going to be enforcing that. So AI ethics itself, we're talking about fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, security, and potential societal impacts, which is what you were mentioning there, Jon.
Yep.
So, but a number of these things arguably are somewhat subjective. So how much of like, I don't imagine then that your tool is making those decisions for the business.
No, we're exactly correct. We're not we aim to be the one that provides the transparency for whatever policy that business makes to be able to sort of enforce their policy, not the ones that sort of are creating the policy, trying to provide the tools that whatever policy is created. Is it no AI anywhere? Is it AI editing is allowed? Having those policies be able to be enforced.
And have you been asked for support with other other indicators that are new? Like I know there's a lot of activity right now, like even like in Canada to promote AI. The United States is definitely more interested in freeing the like the innovative part of it, but the controls around it are definitely coming. So have you been looking at new things that businesses should be aware of that you're going to be trying to leverage in your tooling?
So, no, but I think the direct answer is no, but I think that there's a broader sort of discussion around, um, you know, how do we on sort of a like country by country scale or societal scale, how do we sort of accelerate AI development and adoption? How do we ethically develop AI? And then we view ourselves on sort of the similarly important, how do we ethically use AI? And I think
Right.
that those are questions that matter. All three. Like I think society's better off if we can accelerate the development of AI, and do it in an ethical way and safe way. And then, but I think similarly, we need to have controls in place for where it can and should or shouldn't be used. And so, yeah, we do find ourselves in conversations about that sort of ethical use, and get pulled in some of the ethical development around. Uh, we did a big study around looking at what websites are blocking GPT bots, blocking the
Mhm.
various AI bots, and we have sort of a tracking of the top 1,000 websites and how many of them are blocking various AI bots, to sort of con control their data from being used in training the model.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that would be another side of it, right? Who owns the data?
Right.
And that's definitely something that's been a heavy focus in Europe. So are you seeing more and more of that happening in North America?
Um, so I think
Or did,
Europe, it's done on a more of a we the biggest discrepancy we saw between who was blocking and not blocking was actually sort of like right-wing leaning versus left-wing leaning media outlets. It was a really interesting sort of difference
mm,
where left-leaning, center left-leaning news outlets were more aggressive at blocking AI bots from crawling their content. Right-leaning were more open to their content being scraped. And that opened up a lot of really interesting questions around, well, if the LLM is ingesting, and an LLM is going to be a reflection of the biases of the content that it consumes and trains on, and if is that a strategic decision by a certain sort of right-leaning news outlets to make that data available, or was it just sort of commercial decision? Anyway, so we don't know those answers, but we were just sort of reporting on the study, and it got picked up by some major newspapers. But yeah, pretty kind of fascinating, that the sort of ripple effect of, hey, we're going to block our data, and what to answer your question, what we're seeing is it's a very sort of website by website decision on what gets blocked and not blocked, and then the laws that the AI models, companies get governed by are very different. And I have less exposure to that between sort of Europe and North America.
yeah. I would definitely imagine content creators that have put the effort in to say this is done by and for humans, that they would really want to protect that work.
So yes, but then the challenge is if the challenge for a lot of content creators and a lot of websites is that if Google and the 10 blue link economy is going to sort of be diminished in level of importance, and more people are going to go and search ChatGPT or other LLMs, then if that becomes a new significant source of traffic, you want your data to be cited because you're going to get some traffic from the LLM's answer. So if you're a business that's selling a service, you would never want to block an LLM. I don't believe you would want to block an LLM from crawling your site because you would want to be mentioned in any LLM's answer related to your business. And so publishers, if you have enough stick, you're the Wall Street Journal, you can sort of push back and work out a custom deal with with OpenAI
Hmm.
or other companies. Because it's a really tricky question for a publisher right now that gets traffic from Google. If they think that Google traffic is going to decline, do they are they better off to sort of embrace their data being consumed by AI so that they get cited more frequently and therefore still get some traffic, or fighting? And it's a tricky question for them that they're facing right now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of being cited. I wonder when they're actually going to require that the models, you know, correctly say, I got this information from these sources. You can
Yeah.
ask it and it'll give it, but it's not necessarily proactively saying, here I quoted this and I quoted that, or I summarized these books. So it'll be interesting if it evolves that way, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and it'll also be interesting on whether even it can. I mean, I think even like our own knowledge is like how do I know how to say this sentence?
Hmm.
I can't say like I learned this discrete sentence from this book. It's like, well, my grade one teacher, my grade two teacher, and my parents are all sort of involved in the foundation of language. And so it's hard for them to be able to, if citing like requirement to cite facts, for sure. But then where does that line get drawn? I think it's gonna
Right.
be an interesting question.
And actually, that kind of brings in zeroing in on another term that I think is really important. Let me just see if I can toggle over. It's the one on transparency. So if you're detecting that this percentage was AI generated, are you seeing a trend to actually acknowledge that? I want to use this content, but this part of it was AI generated. Are you starting to see that trend of like clarity of what we're using AI for?
Yeah, people want to know as much as they possibly can about the content. We try and provide it as clean and as clean an answer as possible as whether or not this is AI created or not AI created. And so the way the tool works is it provides a judgment call, a classification, AI or human, and then a probability score on the confidence of that decision of saying, I think it's human and I'm really, really confident, or I think it's
Right.
human, but I don't know. And so we provide that information, and then we provide highlighting so that they can see which sentences were more likely to have been contributing to the fact that judgment was either AI or human.
Right.
And we see a lot of people really desiring to be able to sort of understand why the model made the decision that it made and what factors drove it to do that. One of the challenges with all AI systems is that they're black box systems where it doesn't explain sort of why it made the decision that it made. It just provides that decision and then provides sort of the data to support that.
Yeah, but this is where some of the legal frameworks are pushing for. Like, why did you make that decision? What was it? Like, if you're saying we're allowed to use these tools, like I'm thinking of tools in organizations where uh, hiring systems or claims or financial loans, the first pass goes through an AI system so that um, the common scripted things can be addressed, but it does mean that some bias can be introduced. I mean, it's going a little off the topic of the content generation, but we are there is a need for that transparency from the AI model itself to explain, its decisions. So do you have your AI systems explaining its decisions?
No, it's not possible with classifiers for them to explain their decisions. They do so. It's one of the sort of um, unsettling aspects of AI, that the explainability of the models is loose, if at all. And so even for example, with Google, if you were to say, ask Google, why did you rank this website ahead of this other website? The answer is that they have some sort of general comments, but they don't know. There's enough sort of intertwined AI systems that they can't answer with sort of confidence to say this is why this one ranked above this one. And similarly, if you ask ChatGPT a question and then you went to and said, "Hey, write me a slide about what is AI transparency," and then you went to sort of Sam Altman or anyone at OpenAI and said, "Hey, why did your tool write this?" Um, they'll give a sort of a polished answer, but the answer does not trace back to reality, in that these systems are black boxes, that the input and the output is sort of the knowledge on sort of why that happened, is not traceable through the black box.
So does any of your tooling in its detection of AI also complement that with highlighting where things like bias, which is one of the more sensitive topics, could have been introduced?
Um,
Like, do you go that granular, or
so,
is it just simply human, non-human?
human, non-human, but we are uh, the ethical development of an AI system should involve evaluation of that system on whether or not it introduced biases. There's no way that any system can be created any that doesn't have some biases. And so we need to be very, very careful to evaluate any AI model that we build to determine what potential bias was introduced into that model. There was some early studies around AI detection, some really bad studies that came one study in particular that came out of Stanford that identified that there was a bias against non-native English speakers. Their study was terrible in terms of it looking only at 80 sample sizes
Oh,
from a student-sourced forum. But because it had the sort of the Stanford brand, it got sort of proliferated around the internet that AI detectors are biased. That's in all studies that we have done to sort of evaluate, is our model biased, and what extent our model is biased. We have been unable to reproduce the bias that they claim they found in other detectors.
Yeah,
So
and that's part and parcel to larger sample size.
yeah, exactly. Because of the larger sample size, because of the proper sourcing of content, where you could be confident in the classification of it as human. Um, so I think, so to answer your question, I think biases will always exist and will always be a reflection of the training data that any AI system consumes. And it is irresponsible to produce AI systems and be ignorant of that. And it is important that there is internal policies in place to evaluate those models for potential bias and correct for it if it exists.
so do you find your clients in using your tool are asking you for that kind of support and guidance?
No, the,
They
not
just want to know
not
yes or no. Human, non-human.
Yeah, no, they're not asking for it. I think they will be, so some of our users within academia who are not sort of focusing on are asking for that sort of data to refute that sort of study that has sort of proliferated. Um, but they're not. They're very eager to understand um, the accuracy and support data that supports the accuracy, and then very eager to understand the explainability.
Yeah,
But explainability is hard. Reporting accuracy is we're eager to do that as transparently as possible.
yeah, yeah. A lot more work needs to be done on that. So looking to the future then, where do you see AI detection technology going? What does it look like down the road?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. I think I think the importance of it, I think the societal harm of AI content being running wild, AI slop sort of taking over different parts of the internet is a problem that is not good for society. I think we looked at a study, over 50% of long form LinkedIn posts were AI generated. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I don't think that's a good thing. I think most people would agree that's probably not a good thing. AI reviews of baby formula. Is that okay or not okay? I mean, I think that's most people would agree that that is definitely not okay. And so I think this sort of societal harm of AI slop running wild unchecked on the internet is in any sort of form is a problem. And so I think that's we're going to see. So where does AI detection go? I think it's going to see more specific applications of it. I think similar to the weather, it's highly accurate, imperfect.
Mm.
I think use cases are going to need, I think the limits of AI detection are going to need to be accepted in environments like academia, where right now it's trying to be applied like plagiarism detection with a binary classification of either AI or not. And that's not a great use case for it. And so I think the sort of acceptance that AI is here, AI slop is a problem, AI detection is a highly accurate but imperfect solution. I think that the sort of acceptance of those three facts are going to increase, and we're going to see an increased adoption of it within the limits of a highly accurate but not perfect tool.
Highly accurate, but not perfect.
Yeah.
So when you say highly accurate, but not perfect, what's the degree of accuracy then that
Yeah,
you
so
would say?
the light model will call AI content AI 99% of the time, and it will call human content AI about 0.5 to 1% of the time. So that's the light model. The turbo model will call AI content AI 99.9% of the time, and it will call human content AI 1 to 3% of the time. And so that's the highly accurate. It will AI our AI detection tool will call
Mm.
AI often and call that correctly, and it will call human AI a very small but not insignificant percent of the time.
Right. So it does happen.
Yeah.
So are you working in the future to make it perfect?
So I think make it better. I
Yeah.
think perfection is never going to be achieved with a classifier.
So where do the human beings come into this picture then?
Which ones?
Well, I'm just thinking, let's go back to the one about highly accurate but not perfect.
Yeah.
So what's the role of humans then? If we're doing AI detection and it's not perfect, what do we do?
Yeah, so I think this is where we're sort of big proponents of use cases where that reality is accepted, that highly accurate, imperfect. And so what's a use case for AI detection that allows for that? And then putting in place policy that can adapt when there is a potential false positive. And so we've developed a free Chrome extension that allows the editor to visualize the writing process of the writer. And so it basically takes every character by character out of the history of a Google document and then recreates the basically a video of the writing process. And so if there is like to your question on like where the humans get involved, is if there's a potential, and we have this happen internally. We've sort of almost 600 articles on our site. Some of those have been identified incorrectly as AI generated. Some of them have been correctly identified as AI generated. And the editor has a conversation with the writer to say, "Hey, this got flagged as AI. Can I see the Google document where you created this piece of content?" And the policy internally is that they have to use Google document for all their creation. And then the editor and the writer have a conversation and sort of look at that detailed report that shows the writing process, the character count over time. And if that all represents sort of there is a relationship, it shows that this was likely human generated, then that piece of content gets published, the writer gets paid. The flip side is if it gets identified as AI, they have the conversation, and the Google document shows that in this 1,000 word piece of content was written in 10 minutes what with two big copy paste, that writer's not getting paid.
Like you mentioned Chrome extension. What's the Chrome extension?
So the Chrome extension is it's the free tool that we provided to help those conversations happen. And
Yeah.
so it takes the Chrome extension goes into the Google document. So if it's installed on your computer, it goes into the Google document that you have access to, and
Yeah.
then can pull out every character by character writing
Oh,
history so that it can recreate that report that we
So it
talked
just
about.
taps into the version control.
Yeah,
so it's yeah, like you said, watching for you didn't write it, you just copy pasted it. But
exactly.
what if somebody really likes working with like LibreOffice and they've got their document out and they just copy paste from it into Google?
There's a case study for us.
Yeah, okay, I think so.
So
I think so. But I guess
I
if
mean,
you're a writer and you know that this is going to be how you're evaluated, then
exactly.
you just, okay, so we're using this and I want to be able to demonstrate the process that I go through.
Right. I'm
Exactly.
not going to type it out in Microsoft Word in that case. I'm
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
type it
I'll
out
just,
on the Google Doc.
Yeah, it's not no writer surprised when the editors like the contract between the writer and the company should spell out
yeah,
the tooling that is required to be used. And so yeah, if that is a deal breaker for a writer, then they don't need to take that job.
yeah. But I think the fact that we would be looking at that kind of activity as a mechanism to know did a human or an AI wrote it speaks to the fact that AI content can look, feel, sound like a human.
For sure can. I mean, humans in all studies that have looked at humans are incredibly good at being overconfident, being confidently wrong.
Confidently wrong.
And AI is good at that as well. It has learned it from the masters. In all studies that have looked at the ability of humans to be able to tell the difference between AI and human content, um, they're usually better, slightly better than the flip of a coin. About 60% of the time we'll correctly call AI, but we'll believe that they called it correctly about 90+% of the time. So
Right.
the gap from confidence to reality is really, really massive in humans' ability to detect AI.
So in my head, this whole conversation about content has been text.
Yeah.
Are you looking at any other kind of
Sort of
generated?
multimodal
Yeah, multimodal,
detection.
because that's like video,
Yeah.
images. Are you into?
Yeah. So looked at it. Our users aren't asking for it. Our technology team or AI research team could build it. Um, it's 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 a tougher problem in that I think it would be unreasonable for us to expect that we would be able to produce something that wasn't highly accurate but not perfect, likely lower accuracy
Mhm.
than the text detector. And the use cases for image detection and video detection and audio detection is a much more discrete is this image AI generated or
Mhm,
not?
mhm.
It is not out of all of these, on this website, out of all these 1,000 articles or these 1,000 comments that got entered today, what percent of them are AI generated? And we need to kick the AI generated ones out. That use case has some allowability for highly accurate and not perfect. This is a image that has come out of Ukraine, Russia,
Mm,
Gaza, some
mm.
hotspot in the world. Was this AI generated or not?
Yeah.
It's a sort of political buzzsaw that we don't want to stick our head into
Why?
because it's imperfect.
Yeah,
The
right.
tool will be imperfect. Um, and we think that there's other tools that are out there that don't do a great job at it. I just don't think it's a great. I don't think I think it's a tough one for us to solve and be confident that we're doing more good than harm.
Right. And that's
So the
where,
question is this Arizona court reporter an AI generated object?
yeah.
Right.
And I think this is where we can reassure ourselves as humans why we still want to have people going and reporting on facts.
Yeah.
Like somebody like they have a relationship with that you can trust. so that you're being selective about where you're getting, like your example of getting news from. To be able to trust it, we need a human there.
Yeah.
So there's still going to be jobs for us. Yay. Yeah, very, very good. Thank you so much. I'm just noticing the time. So um, there's definitely things I'm interested in hearing about the evolution and going down the road, but I think we can defer that conversation to another point. And definitely if laws change where more of doing the detection come up, I'd be interested to see how responsive your company is going to be able to be there for that. So
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
yeah.
That's a good opportunity.
Yeah, so I think we're going to hand the floor over to you, Mike, so that you can let people know if they want more support in their work with AI.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. So, like you mentioned, Christine, we are still going to have jobs. So let's talk about our job. So our job is one of 7 items. We've got them listed here. So what we do is we start out, we talk to the executives, we look at the AI opportunity and get in alignment. So the goals of the organization and the goals of the AI project, looking at KPIs, ROI, and the business case. It's really important. I mean, how many times have we heard about an IT group that's developed this really cool AI tool and then later tries to figure out how to align that with the organization? So it's a little bit like they designed an office for everybody. And it has a massive data center in the middle of it. It's got a really cool foosball room, but it has no meeting rooms. They're like, well, if we don't have any meeting rooms, we can't have meetings. So the IT guys feel like we have too many meetings. So yeah, it's kind of better if we take the approach of talk to the executives and build from there, from top level. Data and governance readiness, so assessment of data maturity, looking at infrastructure and governance, starting out with a governance approach, but having it more adaptable. So as things change, you can adapt your policies subsequently. Solution architecture and design validation. So looking at the architecture, getting into the really tactical moments of how are the data flows going to work? What tooling are we going to use to start off with? It can change over time. And what types of integrations, API callouts we mentioned earlier, that would be part of the discussion. So we're ensuring fit, but we're also ensuring scalability over time. AI risk ethics and regulatory strategy. We work with lawyers globally. If you have a global company, we can set you up for using the EU's AI Act as part of it. GDPR would be part of that. Whatever it is that we need to scale in terms of your governance and your regulation globally. 5 would be end-to-end development and integration. So built-in ML ops, change management. It's what we're doing there is we're accelerating the time to value and spending less time going through PowerPoints and more time developing a product and seeing if it's going to fit or fail. Enablement for leaders, teams, and users. This is a big part of what we do, training. So upskilling, getting the right people on board to run your project. You may not have the people you need right now. So you'll have to develop them or hire them. We can definitely facilitate end-to-end in that perspective. And then lifecycle management and continuous optimization. There's no point in setting and forgetting an AI project because it's such a fast-moving environment. You always want to continuously upgrade and have the most efficacious system that you can have. Not unlike what Jon's doing with Originality.AI. How much time do you spend on number 7?
It's constant.
Constant.
Yeah, right. We have a red team and a blue team internally, and yeah, constantly battling one another.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So if I'm on the red team, I don't have to call my baby ugly. The blue team can call it ugly, right?
Right.
That's perfect. And then on the next slide, we go into comparison of PZ versus the competition. When I look at this, I'm looking at our team, the speed that we deliver at, the cost structure, engagement style, governance and compliance, and brand. And so if you You can take a look at where we are versus the competition in the two middle columns. But I would say as a team size, we're all very senior advisors. We have a lot of experience in AI deployment. We're agile, so 1 to 2 weeks to advisory delivery can start. Try that with Gartner.
Yeah.
Clear pricing tiers, low overhead, direct to expert value. We do not have a multi-billion-dollar organization to support, and so therefore we don't include that in our pricing. Simple as that. Custom fit strategies built to implement and not to analyze. So I think a lot of corporate executives feel this pain. The organization spent a few $100,000 and we got a really awesome PowerPoint. Governance and compliance. So embedded compliance, risk, and future proofing from day one. So let's bring lawyers in from around the world, have them work on your project, and continue to do that as we go along and things change. In terms of a brand, we are lean, we are elite, and we're built for execution and not just for reputation. So with that, let's jump into Q&A. If anybody has any questions on the chat, feel free to ask away.
And while you're looking to do that, I want to highlight that Jon from Originality.AI is offering a bonus of a free no-risk trial to see what his tooling is like. And Jon, do you want to just explain how people, like who's eligible and how they would go about taking advantage of that trial?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, anyone that was on this webinar and was interested in learning more are able to just we'll make it really simple. Just email me, Jon at Originality, Jon at originality.ai, and I'll help get them set up to try our tool out if they think our tool might be helpful. I mean, it's the price point for the tool is $14.95 a month as the base sort of offering. But yeah, we're happy to have anyone that's been on this webinar, if they think it might be useful, give it a shot.
So free, no risk. See what it's like.